Okay, so we'd like to start by giving you a brief history of the tall ship Alyssa. And by brief, I do mean brief. There's a lot of individual pieces of this that can run quite long, as Alyssa now is spanning, as we'll say a few times, 143 years under her keel. So the first photograph that you're looking at here is one of the oldest paintings we have in our collection. You can see in the lower left corner off the bow that she's named Fjeld. It's actually an overpainting over Alyssa. We don't know the original artist of this, but we know it was transferred to the new company that purchased and sailed Fjeld in her original barque configuration. So Alyssa launched 1877 under the auspices of Henry Fowler Watt as the majority owner. There was a minority owner, and she sailed different kinds of cargo all over the world, and though Watt did not retain her for long, she managed to change hands and continue to be viable all the way until today, as we'll see as we go through it here. So the next photograph we have is a picture of Alyssa herself. You can see it's significantly changed. She's locked into a timber bank on the port side there. It's right before a haul-out photo that we have of her. And you can see on the aft section there, down below the stern, that she has the traditional sailing ship rudder. She's rigged in this picture as a barque. And right after this, an aperture was cut into the rudder itself. She was modified with an engine, which we'll talk about a little bit later when you see Alyssa's engine room. And it gave her a lot of viability throughout the next few years. We have a lot of photographs of Alyssa after she was named Gustav. We do not have any photographs of Alyssa herself in her original barque configuration. And a lot of the original restoration was done based on bills of sale and plans and photographs of other sister ships of her, some of which Watt himself also owned. So moving a little bit further forward, this photograph dates right about 1925. She's still named Gustav. You can see that her sailing ship rig is almost non-existent at this point. She's being stripped down into a modified version of a cargo ship, which she lives a lot of her life as between World War II all the way through the 60s when she's Grecian-owned. And you'll see a little bit more detail of that. Up here on the bow, on the starboard side, as you look at it, you can see a modern Navy stock-style anchor brought up into the hawse pipe there, and double-deck superstructure back aft. A little hard to see in the black and white photograph, but there's actually a stove pipe coming up off the break of the quarterdeck there, and that's where the engine exhaust was piped. And that exhaust pipe, as a lot of them in the era had, was on a swivel, so you could move it from side to side depending upon where the wind was coming from. So here we have later on in Alyssa's life one of my favorite photographs. This is how Peter Throckmorton found Christophoros, then Achaios, in Greece. She had been completely stripped of her sailing rig. You're looking at a crane derrick amidships, which was where the mainmast would have been. The clipper bow that you'll see later as we walk around the ship itself is completely snubbed off. A double deck cargo or passenger space back aft, built over top of the original scuttle and the original officers' quarters. And she's a complete cargo carrier. She's even reported as having been smuggling cigarettes around the Grecian Sea until she was deemed no longer profitable, tied up, and eventually destined for complete scrap. It's right around this time period where Peter Throckmorton, who had seen the vessel a few years prior, had engaged the Grecian ship owners of the vessel, had realized that she was a historic sailing vessel, and started the long process that brought her to Galveston. There were a number of other places that were interested in purchasing a vessel, restoring a sailing vessel, and it's really only through an incredible set of circumstances and a unique group of people that enabled her to make her way to Galveston. So Galveston Historical Foundation wound up purchasing the vessel in the late 70s, probably thinking that it wouldn't cost them near as much as it wound up costing them. in order to get it fully restored. They did a lot of work in Greece in order to get the hull sound and a lot of the associated upper structures stripped. And then she was towed across the Atlantic to Galveston. They had originally hoped to have her fully rigged and sailed across the Atlantic, which obviously wasn't possible. And it was only by bringing the vessel back into Galveston were they able to get funders and donors behind what seemed like an impossible project in order to restore the ship into her British barque sailing glory. Here's a shot of Alyssa right before she was towed back. You can see that she's got some renewed pieces to the vessel on the side, a little boarding ladder off the port hull, and just a unique comparison to one of the other cargo vessels that's next to her right there as she goes forward. So once she's towed into Galveston, as I said, they had been a lot of pomp and circumstance around the bringing of Alyssa back to Galveston, and there was a large crowd of people here on the docks in Galveston in the late 70s that were excited to see Alyssa brought into the pier. And actually the local newspaper dubbed it the Emperor's New Clothes because she was towed in as an empty hulk almost, with a sound hull and little else. And then a group of folks who, as I said, did incredible work, were able to bring together the funds. There was a large group of paid staff, a large group of volunteers, a labor of love. They worked for the next several years in order to renew the decks, renew the bulwarks, renew the cap rails, put new masts in, run new running rigging, all of the unbelievable tasks that are associated in a restoration project of this to get her back up and sailing. And largely that effort was recognized later on by the United States by recognizing Alyssa as a National Historic Landmark, which we're proud to carry that designation to this day. She's also recognized as the official state tall ship of Texas, which is something we're also very proud of. She is obviously the only main tall ship in Texas, but that aside, she deserves to be the official state tall ship of Texas, in my opinion. So here's a shot of Alyssa fully restored, almost all the sails set except for the gaff topsail back aft, charging along in the Gulf of Mexico, probably making a speed of 10 knots, which is an incredible feat when you think about just how long her life cycle has been at this point. To see this photograph of a vessel of this caliber sailing today really harkens you all the way back to her launch date in 1877 and her original voyages carrying all of that necessary cold timber and cargo that vessels of this kind built a lot of the cities and worlds that we deal with today. So Alyssa carries on. Here's a shot of her up out of the water in 2016. There was a large need for repair work done after some damage that had been caused by Hurricane Ike. And in 2012 to 2014, Galveston Historical Foundation embarked on almost a complete second restoration of the vessel. An enormous amount of the plate below the waterline, or the steel cladding, was renewed with half-inch thick steel. A brand new deck was laid on the vessel from stem to stern. It's high-quality, old-growth Douglas fir. The rigging was pulled from its bootstraps and reinstalled at the deck level, and we've continued to work on improving the rigging, both standing and running, and replacement of spars throughout the last several years in order to keep the vessel in top shape and sailing and providing her mission. So now today, Galveston Historical Foundation runs Tall Ship Alyssa as mostly a dockside attraction. We see visitors from all over the country that walk across her decks. You can pay an admission fee to do that at the Galveston Historic Seaport. And we run one of the best sail training programs in the country where we teach people of all walks of life how to sail a vessel of this size and style. Everything from emergency drills to knot tying to climbing aloft to working on the ship. And it's an incredible effort to pull all of those pieces together. And one of the keys we had in order to keep her going forward is this photograph you see right here, which is actually the marking of the load line on the side of the hull, which is being chiseled in from a small boat. We worked with the American Bureau of Shipping and the United States Coast Guard to recertify the vessel in 2018 to an SSV, or sailing school vessel. It enables us to take trainees when we get underway for our annual day sail series, so you can follow Galveston Historical Foundation for that and look for your opportunity to come along with us on a day sail where we'll teach you some of the basics, show you a little bit of the ropes, and let you see some of the magic that is Alyssa with all the crew and the volunteers that are here. And then here's one last shot of her with a bunch of the sails being furled, and you're looking at Alyssa underway with that awesome group of people that spend 20 Saturdays over 7 months to learn the skills of the ship, along with a paid officer corps and those of you from the public who participate with us. And we hope you can learn a little bit more about us, are interested a little about what we're talking about. And to cap all this off, we're now going to walk you around to some of the unique features, not all of them, but the ones that we can cover in the scope of this lecture, and show you a little bit about the ins and outs of the tall ship Alyssa, and hope that you'll find a way to make your way down to Galveston to come and visit us, or if you just think we're that cool, feel free to go ahead and hit that donate button to make sure that we win the crowd favorite. Hi, I'm Mark Sabinico with Galveston Historical Foundation. I'm the port captain and director of Galveston Historic Seaport, and we're standing on the head deck of the 1877 tall ship Alyssa. She's a phenomenal piece of history, a National Historic Landmark, and one of the finest examples of historic ship restoration that exists in the world today. She's one of 3 oldest actively sailed ships in the world, and the keel on this ship, as we said in the name, is laid in 1877. So what we're going to do here today is we're going to give you a walkthrough of what the ship is, show you some of the cool pieces and features of it, as well as an in-depth below-decks tour so you get a little bit more intimate about what's going on with Alyssa herself. So I imagine if there's some breaks or some screw-ups in this, you can chop them. I hope. We'll see. So we're standing out here on the head deck. Alyssa is 205 feet sparred. She's made up of Lowmore wrought iron, which we're going to talk a little bit more about as we go down below. She's a mix of modern steel, traditional riveted iron, and then an enormous amount of wood and timber making up her decks, her spars, and all the associated gear required for the vessel to operate and sail. If we pan through some of the stuff that's up here on the head deck, we can take a look at her primary anchoring equipment. There's a 4-decks capstan that has a 2-speed function. It's got a 3-to-1 speed and a direct 1-to-1 speed. And then her primary anchor windlass, which is a pump-style anchor windlass that we use to operate the ship's anchors, a 1,000-pound hook on one side and a 1,200-pound hook on the other side. And it's just part of the traditional nature of the vessel itself as we sail her based on traditional methods and techniques that we use, fully functional. This anchor windlass was actually forged in Lunenburg Foundry in the 1970s restoration. So to show you a little bit more and neat stuff that goes on board the tall ship Alyssa, we're going to carry our way down into the belly of the beast, so to speak, and we'll be looking at some of the parts of the vessel down below decks. So this is Alyssa's forehatch. It's made out of Douglas fir. It's 2 inches thick on all of its sides, and it complies with the 1930 load line rules for the American Bureau of Shipping. We're going to head down into the forecastle, down into the lower forehold, and take a look at one of the most unusual features of this vessel. It's one of my personal favorites. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. Great. All right, so here we are down into the hold of Alyssa's lower forehold. There's multiple compartments of the vessel, She was subdivided in 1986 for watertight integrity in order to meet her current subchapter standards. But down here below the waterline, you get a really unique perspective in some of the metalworking matrix that makes up a ship of this age. And as weird as it sounds, this small section of the ship, all the way up forward here near the bow, showcases almost 143 years worth of metallurgy. So you can maybe see on the camera each of these individual frame numbers between frame 72, 71, 70, and 69. The lower section here is half-inch thick mild steel that the Historical Foundation renewed the underwater part of the vessel with after some damage that was caused by Hurricane Ike in 2008. This steelwork was put on in 2012 in Bollinger Shipyard in Texas City. But above that, you'll see some very large rivets, which is the riveted construction here. This is original plate to Alyssa herself. It's a 143-year-old Lowmore wrought iron foundered in Aberdeen, Scotland, that continues to last and is durable and a high-quality material. And just forward of that, behind this gray pipe right here, some smaller rivet heads indicate some riveted steel that was put in the 1930s after some accidents she had in the Baltic Sea. So between the 3 or 4 different panels here, you're looking at a metalwork framework that works, it's durable, but showcases all the different ways you can tie steel construction in together on a ship of this age. Really is one of my favorite parts. People probably don't care that much about where the head and shower is. So here we are in Alyssa's lower forecastle. This is a modern space that would have been cargo, sail, cordage, other types of material, not general cargo for the vessel, but we've modified it into a crew quarters space for the vessel. Alyssa was recertified in 2018 as Subchapter R, or Sailing School Vessel. And as such, when we go on voyages for day sails or longer voyages, we take a group of sailing trainees that volunteer with us, and they sleep in these very excellent, high-quality bunks that you're looking at here. We have a set of another 20 in the compartment in front of us that we're going to go through, and then you'll see our crew mess and then our engine room space. And it gives you a comparison of how the regular folks who sail on the ship live, work, and function, and some of the disparity between crew today and officers today. It's very similar as what you've seen 143 years ago. So we'll head right here through this watertight bulkhead door into the next space. It's probably better if I run back aft and turn on a bunch of lights and then come back and start, if that's okay. Cool. Cool. All right. You good? Ooh. Sorry, I think it'll overpower your video if I don't kill both of them. There we go. That'll do it. Okay. Oof. All right, so we've started to make our way aft. This is a compartment that we call the mid-hold. It's used as crew berthage, additional bunks as we talked about in conjunction with the lower forecastle that you saw just earlier. We have 20 bunks in this space. It's right underneath the main hatch. And as we make our way aft here on the tall ship Alyssa, a lot of the midships plating of the vessel is all original to her. Midships plating on this vessel as built thickness was 9/16 of an inch, which is incredibly large thickness for the type of material that we're dealing with. In 1877, ships of this kind were still experimenting with iron construction. They were built much like wooden vessels were of their time period, and so you can see the individual frames with the numbers written on them. Those are 21 inches on center, which is a much closer frame spacing than almost anything you would see today. And again, the thicknesses are way thicker than they need to be for the strength of the material, and a lot of that finite detail, which isn't really the glam and glitter that you see of the vessel above the decks, is a tribute to just how strong she is and why she still exists today. And the continual upkeep and preservation of that material enables us to keep a lot of that original historic fabric and lets us continue to do the types of operations that we're doing. So we're just going to keep making our way aft through this crew space. We'll pass through yet another one of the watertight bulkhead subdivisions. There's several of these on the vessel that are modern to the ship. When the vessel was originally a cargo carrier in the late 1800s and early 1900s, she would not have been subdivided in this compartment. It would have been completely open and filled with as much cargo as possible. Alyssa carried everything that you can imagine, from coal, wool, timber, bananas, all different types of materials that were available in an attempt to make a profit as a cargo carrying vessel. So Alyssa visited here in Galveston twice, once in 1883 and once in 1886. And in 1883, she showed up with a load of bananas, which was publicized in the newspapers, discharged that cargo, took on a load of cotton, which Galveston was famous for, and left the port. Her second stop here in 1886, she actually showed up with no cargo, hoping to pick up something here in Galveston in order to make a profit, and was unsuccessful as there had just recently been a tropical storm hurricane that had blown through the area. So she actually entered Galveston empty, left empty, made her way to Pensacola, Florida, where she picked up a load of lumber to take to South America, which is a little different than what we think of these days, where you think about where timber and lumber comes from. So directly over here, you're looking at the mainmast coming through the deck down into where the bilge is, and some piping for the manual bilge pump, which we'll take a look at when we get back up on the main deck itself. This aft space, or aft hold, we've accommodated or transformed into a crew quarter space. So we use it for meals below decks when the weather is rough, or for safety briefings or other things where we're doing vessel operations. And then when we're here tied up at the dock, it's also an exhibit space for us. So we showcase some of the different things about Galveston itself, coming into Galveston through immigration, cargo that was carried on Alyssa herself, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll keep making our way aft, and we're going to tuck into one of the more modern spaces on board the tall ship Alyssa. All right, so here we are in one of the more modern spaces on board tall ship Alyssa herself. This is our engine room. Alyssa, as built in 1877, did not carry an engine. The first engine on the vessel itself was fitted in 1918 when she was in Gustav, or named Gustav, and it was a type of engine known as a hot bulb engine that could burn any type of fuel that was available. In 1985-86, the Galveston Historical Foundation retrofitted Alyssa back aft in order to have a more modern engineering space for longer trips, which was part of her trip to New York in 1986. So it's a Detroit diesel. It's a 450 horsepower engine. We've got two 35 kilowatt generators on the other side there. They're modified Stewart & Stevenson's or John Deere engines that provide power for the vessel when we're out and underway. and then an array of other systems that are required for the modern function of the ship as a sail training vessel. We provide everything from emergency dewatering, firefighting capabilities, freshwater pumps in order to operate the forward heads and the showers, all the things that we need for crew comfort and to meet modern day regulations on board the vessel itself, electrical distribution, and on and on and on. So it's a different part of the ship than you would think of when you think of historic sailing ships, but it's essential for vessels of this size, especially in the modern day and age. One of the key components for Alyssa surviving as long as she did was the engine retrofit in 1918. Vessels of this size, if they were able to make their way in and out of port without having to pay the extra money for harbor tugs to get in and out of harbor, they could be just that much more profitable and could compete against the modern steaming ships that were slowly taking over the industry. So, having seen all this modern equipment, we'll make our way up this next hatch into the luxurious officers' accommodations. So now we start to make our way back aft into the officers' quarters. And what you're looking at here is the Alexander Hall & Co. builder's plate for hull number 294 in Aberdeen, 1877. This original builder's plate was on the vessel when she was found by Peter Throckmorton, a naval archaeologist in Greece, which is one of the key factors that led us to understanding just the history and the evolution of this vessel, and one of the primary reasons why she was targeted for restoration and salvation by Galveston Historical Foundation. So it's a really unique piece that we have here on the mizzenmast, and it's a nice feature as we make our way back aft into the captain's quarters itself. Once you make your way back aft here into the main saloon, you're looking at the primary area where business was conducted, where the captain's quarters were, where the spare cabin was for the owner's representative. Alyssa was unique in a lot of ways in that the original builder, Henry Fowler Watt, sometimes acted as master of the vessel, largely in part to help offset the cost of voyages that weren't always the most profitable. But many times you would have both the owner's representative and the captain of the vessel sailing in company to handle business and the day-to-day operation of the vessel. Alyssa's aft cabin restoration is a gorgeous example of traditional interior finish that we was seeing in the late 1800s. It's mostly bird's eye maple with a unique finish and shellac over all of the area's internal woodworking. We've done a lot to keep up the original fit and feel of the aft cabin, and we think it showcases really well what it would have looked like and how she would have operated and sailed all those years ago. So we'll make our way back up onto the quarterdeck following this elegant spiral staircase that is here in the aft cabin. So here we are back on the quarterdeck of the tall ship Alyssa. This is the primary steering station for the vessel, in fact the only steering station for this vessel. She's a direct drive worm gear, which is the wheel straight to the rudder. This is another casting that was done in Lunenburg, Nova Scotia in the late 70s, a replica to the original steering gear of the vessel. It's fully functional. We use it every time we get underway. And from this vantage point here in front of where the compass is, as you look forward and then up into the rig, you get a great view of what the actual primary propulsion of the vessel is. Alyssa is an auxiliary sail vessel, meaning that the engine we looked at earlier is exactly that, auxiliary sail. So spread amongst the yards and the fore and aft sails here, you're looking at almost a 1/4 acre of canvas that's capable of propelling the 600-ton vessel upwards of 12 knots in the right winds and conditions. She is an awesome example of true traditional sail. Though she was built in Aberdeen, Scotland, she's been American flag since the 70s. She's load lined by the American Bureau of Shipping, and she regularly functions as one of the best sail training platforms in the United States, where people can come and learn about her history, work with us and volunteering with us, train on traditional maintenance, traditional skills, and traditional sailing, and we're incredibly proud to keep the tall ship Alyssa going for the next 143 years.